That's what we did. We were scumbags. We loved being on bikes and we loved strippers. And I woke up one day after about 7 days of doing it and I was like, what the am I doing in life?
Welcome to Patched, where we look at the personal impact of life in outlaw motorcycle clubs. This episode, my co-host Jason and Mooch and I sit down with Johnny Bomber, former member of the Mongols Motorcycle Club.
This is not how you live life. This isn't what it was meant to be. And that day I made the decision to never do it again, and I went and talked to my P and I told him what was going on, and he supported me, and it made it easy.
That's this episode of Patched.
Are you an active member? The kind that would be missed? Or are you just content that your name is on the list? Do you attend the meetings and mingle with the flock? Or do you just stay at home and criticize and knock? Do you take an active part to help the club along? Or are you satisfied to just belong? Do you push the cause along and make things really thick? Or leave the work to just a few and talk about the clique? Think this over, brother. You know right from wrong. Are you an active member? Or do you just belong?
Thanks to Hims for supporting Patched.
Feeling a little stalled out in the bedroom? Through Hims, you can get some gas back in the tank with personalized ED treatment options that are accessible without ever stepping foot into a doctor's office.
Hims provides access to a range of doctor-trusted ED treatments like chewable tablets, Viagra, Cialis, and their generics for 95% less. Start your free online visit today at hims.com/patched.
Hey Mooch, hope you're doing good. How are you?
Hey, good man. What's up, Jason? Hey, a question we got asked last season that we wanted to address is some viewers reached out and asked if it's really true if you have to sign your motorcycle over when you join a motorcycle club. You know, in my experience in the first club I was in, the Vagos, that was an old rule. But, you know, a lot of times, a lot of things have changed over the years. One, for example, is a lot less people own their motorcycle. So you can't really sign over a pink slip to something you don't own. And also with federal laws, you know, you're putting your team, your chapter, your guys in a bad place if you're going to go try and take someone's motorcycle. So that rule eventually changed. And in the Mongols, it was never a rule anyways.
Yeah, I'd agree with all that, Mooch. It's an old rule from certain charters, depending on the area and what state and what was going on. You know, older clubs might have had that as part of their thing when they switched over or patched over to a larger 1% club, and they might have kept it in that area. But like you said, nowadays you're just asking for a whole band of charges against your charter by taking someone's bike. So even if they agreed to it, good luck. So I don't recommend it. Just some advice out there.
Yeah, my understanding is it was, you know, back in the day was a rule that when you started prospecting, you'd sign over your pink slip. And like I said, most people don't have pink slips anymore. And then we already said the illegal stuff. So I think it's been kind of dropped. As far as I know, there's not any clubs that still do it.
But the stories are cool, though. I'll tell you that. To hear the stories, it's like, wait, what happened? He was just about to leave, and then...
Yeah, You're discouraging a guy from quitting and encouraging a guy for snitching. So it's kind of a double-edged sword.
But second question, for Hells Angels and then for Mongols, what is the most popular model of Harley-Davidson, and how customized do they usually get? I'll give an answer for my club. For my club, yeah, they might modify some bars, but mostly it's modifying for more horsepower, right? So it's not like customization of the bike for any like specific design style. I mean, yes, guys do tons of custom paint jobs that cost thousands of dollars. But as far as a Hells Angels bike is usually just beefed up for higher horsepower. So I can't speak to like what the Mongols do, but I just know that we're all about more horsepower to rip it down the road.
Yeah, this is something I actually get really excited about because I think it's really cool, is that over the years, each club kind of developed their own style, so to speak, of motorcycles. And, you know, nowadays there's a lot of overlap. But initially, you know, the Hells Angels kind of invented that club style, so to speak, that one that's really popular. And that's, like you said, fast, narrow, slender for going in and out of traffic, held up high for cornering, canyon carving. Like, so the Hells Angels had that club style, the Dynas, FXRs. You know, Mongols at the time were well known for having the lowered heritages or deluxes with the fishtails, the ape hangers, that real kind of cholo look. You know, that Midwestern clubs, Sons of Silence, Galloping Goose, El Forasteros, had the D-rake with the tall tanks and the tall front end, or, you know, long forks. And so I think it was really cool that a lot of times you'd be able to look and say, oh, that bike belongs to that club because they have their own specific styles.
Yeah, exactly, Mooch. Just like that, brother. Here's a comment we received. I know this is a podcast about club life, but man, does it describe issues military members face when getting out of the military.
Yeah, one of the things I get really excited about when we talk about this stuff is the direct overlap or the correlations with all sorts of other things. You know, there's a big group of guys that came from military into club life, and everyone kind of knows about that. But as far as leaving the military or leaving the club and, you know, just having those brothers on your side during like tough times and hard times, I think there's a ton of shared experience there, or a ton of overlap where the things are very similar. So even if you didn't come from a club, or you were in the military, or maybe you were a first responder for several years, I think there's a lot of overlap with these things, and a lot of the discussions and topics we go to can benefit everybody.
Yeah, and I know firsthand that Mooch and I have had guys reaching out to us on Instagram, like since the first season came out, and they're correlating it all to whether they work in a factory with a group of guys or whether they're on the fire department. I mean, we've got all kinds of people reaching out, and they're saying, I feel like this is helping me, and they were not ever associated with the 1% Motorcycle Club. So just give you a little background on that.
So for this episode, we had on former Mongol Johnny Bomber. Bomber came from Southern California, former military member, and came from a family of immigrants.
Inspired to join the military after September 11th.
After leaving the military, he found the brotherhood he was seeking in the 1%er community.
Let's get to the episode.
All right, today we have with us a good friend of mine, Bomber. He's a former member of the Mongols Motorcycle Club and a former member of the Army. So we're going to talk about his history and, you know, kind of get into it. So Bomber, thanks for joining us today.
Thank you guys for having me. I appreciate it.
So my first question was, it looks like you grew up in the Orange County area. So what was kind of your lifestyle like growing up, or what was it like growing up in Irvine?
Oh, man. I grew up like polar opposite that I probably look right now. Definitely not gangster. Quintessential little white boy life. I had two immigrants for parents that moved here from a country called Yugoslavia back in the day. So I grew up in kind of like a mixed culture between growing up Muslim and very conservative, and then kind of, you know, assimilating to the American culture. Obviously, I fell in love with the American culture because I didn't look like anybody else in my family line. But nonetheless, you know, I did my thing in Irvine. I stayed out of trouble. I was just a normal kid, man. Very quiet, shy. I was a skateboarder. And then I fell in love with video games, and I started playing video games for quite some time. September 11th happened, and that was my end of Irvine.
What was it like kind of growing up with that Muslim heritage and background, and, you know, getting into the military, getting tattoos and all these things that, you know, if we don't know much about it, you think that, you know, it's kind of anti against the way you were coming up?
It was. To be honest with you, it was a really weird internal struggle that I had to deal with for a long time, because nobody ever understood like the pain that I caused my family by doing the things that I did. And at the same time, obviously, I got to kind of carve my own path in life. And I always knew I was that against the grain kind of guy. But it was tough, you know. It did play a role. I mean, I've probably put my mom in tears more times than any grown man ever should. And I'm a mama's boy. I love my mom to death. So now I feel guilty as hell about it. But it also kind of changed their perspectives too on things. You know, they don't look at tattooed people the same way that they were taught to as gangbangers or this, that, the other. It's changed a lot of people by me growing up the way that I did and then pushing against that grain. So it ended up panning out for the best, I think.
You're saying that your relationship with your parents now is pretty good, and you guys probably look back and laugh at a few things, and, you know, just have a different perspective on things moving forward.
You know, I was fortunate. My relationship with my family has always been good. Me and my dad used to butt heads quite a bit when I was growing up, and I think that's pretty average for most boys growing up with a father, right? You're going to butt heads against the alpha in the house. But he's a very smart man, and I wish I'd taken his advice way sooner in life. And me and my mom always close. I mean, she's been my number one. My sister is one of my best friends on the planet. I'm fortunate, man. I was very fortunate with a good family and a solid background.
That's awesome. It's good to hear.
Being from Orange County and growing up skateboarding, you know, the punk rock scene was really big in that era, right? So were you involved in any of that, or like was there other like subcultures you were involved in growing up?
So yes and no. I didn't get into the music scene until I'd seen Thrice for the first time playing at the Quad in Irvine High, and they played Deadbolt, right? And I didn't know how big of a factor music was going to be, but at the time I was so enthralled in skateboarding, and I was a big bodyboarder. I'd get up at 4 o'clock in the morning, dude, before high school. I'd go to the beach with my friends. We'd roll in at 7:30 with sand on our feet. And we're in Irvine, you know, so we're still 10, 15 minutes away from a beach, but that was just my life. I didn't get involved in like the punk hardcore scene. I have so many friends that do that and are involved in that world and involved in even like I forget what they call them, but they have like CYC. They got like patches and stuff.
Yeah, like all the whole hardcore crews. Yeah,
hardcore crews. There you go. So all of my closest friends all belonged to those things, but it wasn't a part of my life. No, I was more like bodyboarding, skateboarding. I was just Jackass was my era. So if you can imagine Jackass, that's what I was doing from about 13 to 18 when I went into the military, dude. Finding ways to get up in a very interesting manner.
And so let's talk a little bit about, you said that 9/11 happens and your time in Orange County comes to a halt. So I'm assuming that means that you enlisted in the military. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah, I did. So, 9/11 happened. I was a freshman in high school when that happened. So I was a little bit, below the age gap of joining.
Yeah. But it sparked the interest.
Oh, 100%. I went to the recruiter's office the day of 9/11. And I put myself on what's called a delayed entry program, DEPS. And I was in DEPS for the next 3 years until I went in my senior year. And that's a whole interesting story of its own. But yeah, my parents being immigrants, I've traveled enough in this world to see what it looks like outside of this country. Hence why, like my clothing brand, everything has an American flag on it. This country really, whether people want to complain about it or not, is like one of the most beautiful things you'll ever see. Just the sheer fact that people can make it here to some degree. Like where they came from, there was nothing like that. So I felt like my family to some degree owed some debt, if you will, to the country. And what better way to serve it or pay my family's debt off by going into the military. Obviously the 9/11 thing was a huge catapult that actually made me go and sign the paperwork. It went from like an idea to paperwork.
The reality.
Yeah, the reality, exactly. But yeah, that's exactly how it went. And then I ended up on that delayed entry program until December of 2005, and I shipped out.
How did your family feel about you joining the military? And especially, coming from a Muslim background, how did they feel about you joining the military, especially during 9/11?
Yeah, it was a rough outcome, is what I would want to say. The decision was easy for me, but they had a very, very hard time with it. And it was a kind of up way of doing it from my part, but I'd really kind of started rebelling against the whole Islamic community that I'd grown up in around 13. In my opinion, I'd seen a lot of like fakeness within religion where people act one way in public so everyone could see and then do another thing behind the scenes. And that wasn't really my thing. So I stayed away from my family for quite some time at that point, and I joined and given them basically 24-hour notice. I showed up the night before, and they made a spectacle of it regardless, but my mom was devastated. I think my whole family was. She showed it the most. But, a bunch of my cousins and family came over and friends, and I still have the pictures. It's crazy. It was a bittersweet night for me. But I knew I was going off to do something that I wanted to do, and at the end of it, they ended up showing up to my graduation, which is totally against everything. So religion or not, there was no ploy, I think, from like the assumption that because they're Muslim, they had anything against the military. They didn't. They were huge supporters, still are to this day. And I think it ended up being a huge thing because I was one of very few people that did that.
Did it put you in a weird spot with potential other soldiers or the military when they found out that you came from a Muslim background, or were you conflicted with that at all, I guess? But was that a thing?
Yeah, surprisingly enough, it was something that I went in, and I'm pretty good about thinking things through, at least to some degree, when I'm planning stuff out. And maybe not in my love life, but definitely in planning things out. And I didn't think about the fact that going into a United States military in which they're training us that Muslims are the enemy, that I was a Muslim, and my dog tag said Islam on it the first time I went in. And I'll be honest with you, that ended up changing to no religious preference. I did the Islam one out of respect to my family, but yeah, my mind changed, obviously, like many soldiers probably do, when you get woken up every day at 4 o'clock in the morning with flashbangs and grenades and gunshots and trash cans banging, and you're hearing prayer music. Like, I couldn't hear prayer music at my own. I still don't to this day, to be honest with you. It's just something I don't care to hear.
So I think, one of the parallels that we'll get to later when we get into motorcycle stuff, but going into something with these core morals and values, the way you got brought up, and then seeing those change from other experiences and stuff, is that kind of what happened with the Army? Would you say that's kind of how it played out?
So I was fortunate in the fact that I grew up with a good family, again, that I feel instilled a very foundational set of morals in me. Like, I knew what was right and what was wrong growing up. I'll never forget when I was a kid, I got caught taking a wallet, and I was so in 7th grade, man. I knew I did something wrong. And when the cops got there, I cried like a bitch, and I can say that out loud because I don't care. You know what I mean? I was a kid. I knew I'd done something wrong. I shouldn't have stolen that. And my morals, I think, only were enforced with the military. They really just taught me this other level of it, though. It was a lot more of like personal accountability and things along that nature. I still remember they go by this loyalty, duty, respect, selfless service, honor, personal integrity. They run by this code, and that code of ethics seems to have just gradually increased and been sharpened with the experiences that I've had, club included,
And so thinking about all that stuff over the years, and since it's been years since you've been in the military and, keeping in contact with brothers you were in the military with and then, getting into club life, does any of that still weigh on your mind, just being involved in it all and, dealing with the fact of, your faith at the time? And I'm sure now, being older, we always, look back and we can say, the way I acted when I was younger wasn't maybe the best, right? Those decisions weren't the best thing. And as you get older, you can look back on yourself and say, I made a mistake, or I'd like to evolve myself better now, right? So does any of that play into your, being, in your 40s and, just how you run your everyday life, right? Like you take all these things that you've accomplished and been a part of, and do you still think about those times when you were just joining the military and dealing with all the stuff, and does it still weigh on you, from decisions you made back then?
You know what? More often than not, I suffer from all the fun things that I think most grown men that have been through life do: PTSD, anxiety, general anxiety, social anxiety. You can name a million different things. And I think a lot of that is realistically just from me getting caught up in those exact things, right? Thinking about those times, could I have made a decision differently or better? But I'll be honest with you, I didn't really have much of, I was very atheistic growing up because of the things I'd seen in religion as a young kid, and not just there. At 13, I tried to become a Christian, and I had a bad experience with that. And as I grew up, I learned to separate myself from the bad, even in club life, right? You can choose to see the bad in things and just blah, 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 blah about bad, or you could choose to see all the good things in it and kind of run with that. And, I decided to kind of get away from the negativities of religions, which I was a very big, religion, I tattooed an upside down cross on me because I just was anti-religion. And it's somehow, my spirituality with God has never changed. And through that, I feel like I'm just consistently molding and getting better. But yeah, it does make me go back and think about those things quite a bit. Would I change anything? No, because I think everything is what got me to where I am today, the exact way that I'm supposed to be. God had a plan, and whether you're religious or not, again, I'm not a religious person. I do believe in God. But I think there was a plan, and I unfolded it, I don't think we had any other options.
And I think reflecting on your past life, right, and taking it into stride to know that you had some faults and you can admit those to yourself, helps you talk to young guys that are coming to us nowadays, right, for advice. You can tell them, with honest, open, truths to say, hey, you're about to do this, or you're looking to do this, and you might want to look at it from these different sides, not just be yes or no. But I feel like for guys like us that have been in the club life, that you were in the military, for guys that have done a lot of different things, and if you can actually say, yeah, I up in some certain spots, but I've done a lot of good, and I've taken from it, you are a valuable tool to the next generation. We are that valuable tool to the guys that are coming around, the guys that are interested in bikes, the guys that are interested in the club life. It's I get people that ask me all the time, I'm thinking about joining a club, and I'm not trying to tell them no. I'm just giving them advice on what I might have missed when I came around looking into things. And I think that all those life experiences that we've had help us to say we weren't perfect then, and we're definitely not 100% perfect now. But let's take all this knowledge that we have, and let's put it together and spit it out with some truth, I think it's a big thing that can help a lot of people.
I get hit up a lot by viewers from the show and other stuff, and, I think about joining a club, what would you say? And I think, going off of what you're saying, one of the things that's really resonated with me is I like to tell these people, take a step back, and what would joining the club bring to your life? Like, how would it better your life? What are the positives it would bring to your life? Because it did bring a lot of positives to a lot of our lives, right? And we could all talk about the negatives as well. But much like the military, much like a new job, anything, like, how would this help me move forward in life? And I think that's the way people need to start looking at these things. Like, if I step out and join the Army as a teenager, or I step out and join this motorcycle club, what's it going to do to improve me as a person? And I think that's the conversation people need to have with themselves when they're really considering these things.
Yeah, not just think about like, I'm so excited to do this next thing, but like, how's it going to affect me 10 years from now?
Absolutely.
Right? And where am I going to be 10 years from now with having this under my belt, right? I tell a lot of guys like, hey, when you're researching, like you're not researching, but when you're hanging around a group, a charter, some guys, maybe a small club, I go, get to know the members on a real personal level. I go, because if you can like understand how they all operate, and I'm not saying like, all their intricacies, but to understand that they have jobs, that they take care of their families, that they're responsible, that they, you can tell a lot about somebody by if their car's clean or if their car's a mess,
sure.
right? Like all this different stuff that you don't go in blindly thinking these guys are all angels, regardless of what club they're in. You got to really get to know these people because you're going to be in it with them, like in it.
Yeah.
Without any way out except for to walk out that door or to get down with somebody. So you gotta really understand who you're getting in bed with before you join that club.
I know Bomber's heard me say it before, but this is something I really harped on a lot within the Mongols. Is a realization I had as I got older and I was in a club for a long time was I didn't want to look around the room at church and say the only thing I have in common with these guys is this patch. Like, we're forced to be brothers. I wanted to look around and say these are guys I would hang out with whether I was in this club or not. These are guys I would go to the movies with, barbecue with, go over to their kids' birthday parties with. Like, how many times we get hit up and people go, I want to join a club because I'm looking for brotherhood. You don't get handed brotherhood, right? You have to earn it. And you shouldn't have the only shared thing is our top rocker, right? Or we're all in the same club. We really need to have these shared morals and values, shared interests, certain things in common. And the only way to figure that out is, like you were saying, Jason, is hang around, man. Hang around and see it and look at it.
Yeah, because, we all get tunnel vision. It's like we'd like to have that patch as soon as possible, right? Of course, you're like, hey, what do I got to do and how do I got to do this? Like, I want this thing. I want to be part of that group. But that was how I looked at it when I was going in there, tunnel vision. And I want to give these guys that same advice to say, just take a deep breath, take a step back. Like, don't be fooled by the fact that someone's got a patch on.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Get to know what you're getting into, because, we all think we do, but then you get in and you're like, damn, that's surprising. That's surprising. Like that, I didn't expect that, or and like I had a different relationship with people in clubs, right? Everyone knows I spent time with guys from all different clubs, and I had like a solid relationship with guys from different clubs that had my back. And so for me, I clicked and have this core group of people that weren't supposed to have anything in common. That was very special to me, and those are guys I still talk to today. And it's like, you just got to find, like you said, Mooch, like guys that you would want to barbecue with, guys you'd want to go out to dinner with, guys that wouldn't say, oh, you're going to church, that seems lame. They would say, hey, maybe I want to go to church with you. You need help at your house, I'm there for you, bro. Like,
For sure.
we want to go on a ride, it doesn't matter who it is or where we're going, you're invited. Like, that's what you're looking for. That's brotherhood.
So one thing I'm going to say is this. I mean, I'm in the same boat where people always ask me based on experience and all that, and they usually go for my experience because they know that I left the club. But I always offer the same advice, which is just don't get tunnel vision. It's this instant gratification generation that gets that, right? They all want this patch so bad because they see this facade of what comes along with it, which we all saw, dude. I saw the same thing. If I saw a dude in a vest, I'll never forget the first time I saw 1%er was a Vago in Havasu, and everyone, the way that they treated him, I was like, that's gonna be me one day, like, hell yeah, that's gonna be me. But the facade is just that. And the thing is as you get older and you gain this experience in life, those tunnel vision moments seem to disappear, if you'd agree, right? We all kind of don't, like, you may want that car at the dealership, but you're not going to go run and try to qualify for it right away. You're going to go home and you're going to run your finances. We take the time to do things a little bit better, and I think that's what our role, like you said, to help these younger generation of cats that are coming around the motorcycle world. Hey, that's our job, right? Is to just be devil's advocate. Yeah, it's beautiful. It's all fun. The scope is real, but just don't forget all this stuff, like you said.
That adds to why we have so many small clubs nowadays, right? Because everyone wants it so instantly. They don't want to join the guys that have been around. They don't want to join the top 10 clubs in North America. They want to start their own club.
Instant gratification.
I've got guys, and I know Mooch has got guys that are saying, hey, I'm thinking about starting a club, and I'm passionate about this. And I go, that sounds great. But like, if you're going to start a club, are you going to be able to commit to what the club, what your club bylaws should be able to do, which means you guys have to meet certain times a month. You guys need to go on rides certain times a month. I'm like, are you guys committed to doing that? Because there's a reason why these clubs that have been established are here and they're around, because they have put this system into place that works for everyone to an extent, right? It's not too extremely hard, and it's not super soft, right? So if you think you're going to start a club and you just want to meet once a month, I'm like, then why are you starting a club?
Because they want to wear a patch.
Yeah, because you just want to wear a patch. So I'm like, get same T-shirts, stay out of the drama, and just have fun.
You know what, man? I remember being at COC, and I think we talked about this at dinner that night. And me and you I remember seeing you at COC because in my head I was taught that the Hell's Angel was this big devil, and then I saw you, and you were just this. I mean, I'll be honest with you. I pictured you in a fucking suit with your cut on, because I was just like, you're not the normal guy in this world, right? And the way you carried yourself. But I always had this idea from even COC times where I was just like, it's either you're in a motorcycle club, which is, let's call it whatever number we want to call it at the top, or a riding club, or a family club. But MC is for the people that are going to run this program. Mm-hmm. You know, you want to ride? Cool. Go ride with a bunch of buddies. Get some cool patches made on Amazon, sew them all together, and go for rides, you know? Family clubs are a family club. Everybody knows what that is. I don't think it should fall out of those three categories, you know?
There's nothing wrong with any level that anybody's in. I give everybody kudos. I wave to guys on scooters. I think anyone on two wheels is part of our group, and they should all have some place. If someone's broken down on the side of the road, it's our responsibility to make sure everyone's okay. I mean, I'm just saying, though, that jumping into that instant gratification to be part of something that you're trying to be at that level, be careful.
Absolutely.
I think too, part of it is jumping in, but also all of us are goal motivated people, right? We're all goal oriented, and I think some of us probably didn't have the type of leadership or the guy looking out for us to tell us that our goal shouldn't be to get the patch. Our goal should be to be a member for 10 years or to do this or helps, you know. But when your short sight is, my goal is to get through prospecting, get this patch, I think that's when you help get that narrow focus, right? We're like, I'll do whatever it takes. And you don't start thinking big picture. Are these guys I have stuff along? Because we're goal oriented. And I think that's human nature. And I don't think it's anything negative. But I think it's the older generation's duty to say, no, your goal isn't to get the patch. Your goal is to keep the patch, right? To do something bigger or better for the club over the years, because that really starts making you think big picture. And I think that's a piece that's really missing in a lot of clubs.
I think you hit the nail on the head right there, bro. Like, just the older generation's responsibility is to maintain the sanctity of that club. And when you're letting people pull personal favors to get people in and that kind of stuff, or you're shortening times, and when you make those exceptions, you're making exceptions to your club, right? And as far as I'm concerned, like, when I wore that patch, I upheld that to the highest possible standard that I could. Just like when I donned my military uniform, I wore that thing with pride because I knew what it represented. And I feel like those are the things that are diminishing those worlds. You know, it's just that, again, we're going to run back to instant gratification and just not taking your time.
Yeah, we know shortcuts don't work.
There you go.
Shortcuts just don't work. You know what I mean? You got to do the miles. You got to put the miles on to get the respect. And that's all we have to say about the club life.
And some way or another, right? Like, I didn't prospect, and I'm not saying this to defend myself, but I was a member for 15 years. I put in a lot of work for the club. And so, sure, you know, I do agree that everyone should prospect. So, again, I'm not saying this defensively, but you have to put in the work one way or the other. And I don't mean illegal stuff. I mean, you know, working for the club, helping start chapters, bringing members in, you know, keeping everyone on point, doing positive things, you know, helping brothers get help. But you got to put in that work if you're really going to respect that patch.
We're getting on to the subject of bikes and stuff like that.
Yeah.
What type of bike did you ride? You know, what was your favorite? Like, I always ask people, what was your favorite time of day to ride that bike? You know, tell us about some good stuff.
And what got you into motorcycles? Like, what was your first attraction to motorcycles in the first place?
Girls were my first attraction to motorcycles because I had absolutely no experience whatsoever. But I was a BMX kid too, so I played with BMX, but never dirt, never anything crazy. A few years after I got out of the military, I was driving a big old lifted truck, trying to look like the whole Riverside scene because that's where all the hottest girls were, in my opinion, the bro-hos with, you know, the tattoos and oh god. So I tried to play that part very good, and I ended up getting a couple dirt bikes. And as much as I was not a dirt bike rider, I fell in love with the two-wheel idea. So right away, I got my first bike, and it was a ZX-10 street bike. Unfortunately, I'm one of those people that doesn't understand like that there's a brake. I just gas, you know.
And how old were you when you got the ZX-10?
So
I think that's important.
The ZX-10 was right when I got out of the military, so 23. I was 23 years old when I got my first actual bike. I rode that thing for about 6 months before I got into a wreck with it. And it wasn't...
That's what I was going to say.
So get this. I used to ride that thing at like 173 miles an hour. That's when I knew I was going to kill myself.
At 23 years old, you know, your prefrontal cortex isn't developed fully yet. You're not understanding consequences. You're risk-taking. Not to get in the psychological standpoint, but being that young and getting on a bike that's capable of doing such type of speed, that's a dangerous combination.
And then getting out of the military and having a death wish is just...
Yeah. I thought it was just like replaying the Top Gun, you know, riding the motorcycle down the freaking runway at the military base. I'm like, I would have been doing that every week.
I'll be honest with you, bro. The second movie, I kind of feel like I'm in it. You know, there's just a swag to being on that bike, bent over a little bit, so the girls can see your freshly like squatted ass. You know what I mean? Girls appreciate that more than you know. But anyways, I ended up riding that thing like a fool, and I caught myself on very quickly. And then I ended up having the wreck where I just laid the bike down. I totally avoided an accident and everybody else, but it was a wake-up call. So I ended up selling that thing, and I knew I wanted a Harley. So, dude, I went straight to a Harley dealership, and I bought my first bike, and boy, was it the ugliest thing.
What about the Harley was it that you wanted to switch over to Harleys?
I would have done a Harley from the get-go. I just wasn't smart enough to go and do the research myself, but Harleys were always made out to seem as if they were out of reach in terms of price. Like, it's impossible to get financed for a Harley, whereas this bike that I bought, I got it from my cousin in New York, and he sold it to me for like $100 a month. You know what I mean? So the street bike, the only reason I went that way was just easily ascertainable for me, I guess. But the Harley was, I don't know, man. I have pictures of me like 4 or 5 years old wearing Harley t-shirts. Like there's just some badassery to that 80s 90s generation where everybody just loved Harleys. They used to wear the bandanas, if you remember, like the Kumite and what was that one? Bloodsport.
Kumite,
yeah,
Bloodsport.
Yeah.
He's got the freaking bandana on. You know, he wears the t-shirts. It's like it was American history. Of course, I wanted one. You know?
I know, being from the area you're in, did you start seeing clubs around prior to getting a Harley, or did you start noticing clubs after you were riding Harleys? Like, when did clubs get on your radar?
So clubs got on my radar right when I started riding street bikes. Was the first time I'd noticed them. Because, I mean, like I said, I rode pretty fast on that thing. So I'd pass packs and going through, and I'd always be like, damn, that's got to be cool to have a bunch of people to ride with like that. Like, that's cool. But obviously I was on a street bike, and when I'd see street bike clubs, just wasn't really my thing. You know, they were a little bit more wild, kind of all over the road. There was no like formation. It wasn't militaristic, I guess is a good way to say it, or paramilitaristic. So right when I got the street bike was when I first got introduced into it. And then when I got the Harley, I'd already kind of started making my introductions to people in the world. Let's just say that.
So what, you know, you're on the Harley, you're riding around, you're starting to recognize clubs. What drew you to club life?
Well, I'm going to stick with the exact same thing that I think a lot of guys in the military are going to say. There's a camaraderie that you lose when you come out of the military. You may keep in touch on Facebook or text here and there, but it's just not the same. And when you get back to like, I mean, imagine being 18 years old, you disappear from all your high school buddies that you were doing punk rock with or whatever it may have been at the time, and then you come back and you just saw your buddy's leg get blown off, and you've just gone through all this because you're Muslim, and you've traveled all over the world and seen this, that, and then you get back and you go to hang out with all those same buddies, and they're like, hey, we're going to see this rock show this weekend. You know, like, your brain isn't out the rock show. Your brain's still stuck on that leg that you just watched fall off the operating room table.
Right.
So
yeah,
you kind of disassociate with the people that you probably shouldn't, and that was just my way of dealing with it, and that's what led me like directly into the arms of the club life, was just trying to find what I, fill a hole.
So Bomber, one of the things, in some of our other episodes, we've talked about how much similarities guys in other clubs have, right? Despite the patch, how much we have in common. And it boils down to this conversation of generally people join a club that's in their area, right? Like if you're from the New England area, usually the Outlaws or whatever. But you were kind of in a unique situation where in Orange County, there's a lot of different clubs. So how did you decide on the Mongols, or what drew you to pick the Mongols versus the other clubs in the area?
Well, it kind of backdates to a night that I went out. So if I sent your producers a bunch of photos, right? And if you ever see you're gonna see the first picture of me on a Harley. I've got no tattoos, dude. I look like a cop on a bike, and I'm just gonna say it out loud because I make fun of myself for it, right? But I was on a 2013 Street Bob with Z-bars and the ugliest quarter fairing thing you've ever seen installed by Harley at the dealership that they got me to sign on to all that, right? And I'm sitting there in a black vest and a red shirt. So my initial idea coming into the club world was to go with the Hells Angels, because the way that I was educated was, if you're white, you go Hells Angel. If you're Hispanic of any descent, you go to either the Vagos or the Mongols. I didn't know anything about the other clubs. I knew the history of the Hells Angels to what you can read as a civilian because of the military style, right? They came from B-52 bombers, like that squadron. That was a huge deal. You know, I loved the militaristic history of it, and that's what drew me even closer. But one night I went out to a bar, man, and, you know, I'd been taught a little bit of protocol. Again, I didn't come from the gangbanging world or like the club world or anything that has that type of structure, but I applied my military structure, I guess. And I knew that you go to the big dog in the room, and, you know, I saw a couple Hells Angels at a bar, Angels, one night. And I looked at the beers they were drinking. I went and bought exactly what they had, and I brought it to their table, and I just said, hey, you know, I'm Johnny, just want to introduce myself. Nice to meet you. And, well, they didn't take that too nicely, and basically told me to go myself and took the beers. And I was like, cool, all right. So I was like, all right, you know, that was my first experience, and I didn't hold it against the whole club for that reason. But, you know, first experience was that. Second experience the next weekend was meeting a white Mongol. And I was just, I mean, dude, you could have put Jesus right there, and I would have been more struck by the white Mongol. Like, that's how much I didn't know that was a thing. It was at the fish market, if you remember. I mean, God, how many years ago that was, but 2012, I want to say. But at the fish market when we used to do those runs.
Yeah, that's when I was living down there.
Yeah, I'm not going to name who it was, but I saw a white brother, and I was just like, I want to be a part.
Yeah.
You'll have to tell me off air because I'm curious.
Yeah, I will. And dude, not only that, but then I saw my first like Indian brother, right? And I was like, what the hell is going on? They're multiracial. But yeah, anyways, I went to like one event with them, and it turned into a barbecue. And that barbecue turned into like, hey, come over for dinner at my house. And then the next day it was, hey, you want to go for a ride? And dude, what do you do like that? You fall into it, right? It becomes a love.
Absolutely.
A love.
If you're searching for that, and someone extends the olive branch that you're interested in, I mean, I remember, and Mooch remembers, we dropped whatever we were doing to do this stuff. I mean, like, if someone called and said, hey, can you go with me the next day? I was like, hey, everything's put on hold. I'm going with such and such, you know, to go run errands. It's like, I just wanted to be around it.
Goes back to us being goal driven, right? We wanted to be around it, and we were going to drop what we did to do it.
Amen.
Absolutely. So I totally get it, bro. If someone, especially if they're inviting you to a barbecue, to a dinner, I mean, like, that's like you got the golden ticket for Willy Wonka's chocolate factory.
In my world, like, to get invited to somebody's home, you know, in like the Islamic tradition, I guess you would say, and then not only that, but just even my like cultural background, being Albanian, there's no bigger invite than to be brought into somebody's home and eat their home cooked food. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like that's as close to family as you're ever going to get. So for some stranger to invite this random white boy from Irvine with a brand new bike and no experience, that's all it took.
Patch Podcast would like to thank our sponsor, Hims. Thanks, Hims.
As we do, as we're always talking here and we're opening up to people, just remember that a person's sexual health is just as important as their mental health.
Yeah, confidence in the bedroom will transform into confidence in your regular life, and you'll see yourself be happier throughout the day and living a more positive, healthy lifestyle.
There's absolutely no shame talking about it, and there's definitely no shame figuring it out.
Yeah, and it's 100% online, so there's no need for uncomfortable doctor's visits.
Just fill out an intake form on their site, and a medical provider will determine the right treatment option. If prescribed, your medication ships directly to you for free.
Yeah, and there's no insurance needed. One low price covers everything from treatment to ongoing care.
Start your free online visit today at hims.com/patched. That's HIMS.com/patched for your personalized ED treatment options. hims.com/patched. The featured products include compounded products which are not approved nor verified for safety, effectiveness, or quality by the FDA. Prescription required. See website for details, restrictions, and important safety information. Price varies based on product and subscription plan. With hundreds of thousands of trusted subscribers, Hims can help you find the ED option that works for you. Thank you, Hims.
Hey, what's up, guys? This is Mooch. A lot of you have been asking where to get an autographed copy of my book, and the only place you're going to be able to get it is here at the automotoentertainment.com website. The link's down below. We'll have paperback and hardback, so click the link, check it out, and get your signed copy today.
That's great, Mooch. A lot of people have been asking me about that. It's a great read, and you guys got to check it out. Patch merchandise is available at automotoentertainment.com.
Well, it's something Jason and I talked about is a difference between the clubs as far as how they treat civilians, right? And so the way that you were treated hanging around that first club or trying to introduce yourself versus the second time where it wasn't a club you even wanted to join and now you're being invited to dinner and stuff. Once you were an active member, did that change how you treated guests or hang-arounds or outsiders?
No. So let's rephrase it to this. I was very cognizant of the fact that these people were giving up their time and their livelihood, their money, their efforts to something that they're not even technically a part of yet. And I know that because I went through that myself as a hang-around. I tried to treat every single one of them like a grown-ass man, right? Now, whatever decisions they made, repercussions come based on decisions that you make. We're all grown-ass men. I think we say that quite often. But I never, ever disrespected anybody, whether they had a prospect tab on or no patch or another patch. It didn't matter to me. We were all grown men. The patch didn't make us,
I think that's really important. And it's something I've discussed before, I know it's an older generation that thought this, but I never wanted to walk into a bar and people go, oh, Mongols are here. I wanted them to go, oh, Mongols are here. And then we left and they go, oh, man, those guys were great. Like, I don't with them, but they were great. Like, I wanted to be welcome back. Who wants to be somewhere they're not welcome, right? You want to be welcome back. And the other part is civilians could be on your jury. They can be the ones speaking out in your defense. There's so many reasons to not be a bully and not be a dick. And I think that I wouldn't say that other club is like that as a whole, but I'm saying that generation where, hey, can I buy you a drink? Off. Like, I think that me and you, Bomber, and Jason too, we kind of come from that generation that slowly started to turn towards recognizing that, right, and trying to see that change. But I think, the reason I bring this up is it played a big role in your story, right? Like, if you would have seen this white Mongol and he told you to off, you might not have joined the Mongols, right? It might have been a whole different story. And so I think it really shows, how it is to just treat someone as an adult, treat them as a man, and not like you're better than them, and the benefits that can come from that.
I totally agree. I think that's that ego thing that I've seen you guys talk about on podcasts, your previous episodes. The ego thing really does come with this weird form factor that some guys just carry, man, and I don't understand it, I'll be honest with you, I wasn't always the best with names of people that I met at a lot of events, right? And I think we can all agree after a while, you meet so many people that come introduce themselves to you and then they'll come say hi again and hey, I'm sorry, man, I totally forgot your name, right?
Oh, I'm the worst with names, man.
The ego was never there, and I was always as humble as I could be about it because it's like, how honored am I that some person just wants to come and shake my hand, man? Who else is getting that?
You have to build those relationships. You have to treat the people in the public with respect. Going back to that first thing you said, Johnny, about your first introduction with the guys in Orange County from my club, they thought they were doing the right thing at the time by being tough and all that stuff, but we sent so many people running in the other direction with that attitude. And I can't tell you that enough, but we sent so many people running in the other direction because of those interactions. And look what happened. The Mongols got a great member for years. You know what I mean?
And as a grown man and as you read people and you read the situation, there's so much more to be seen or to respect when you see someone that could be respectful because they're confident in who they are as a person, so they don't have to be that your drink or who are you, right? Like, to me, that's that fake flex, that fake tough guy stuff, where the real guys are, every one of us I know would rather leave a bar and someone go, man, that guy was really cool, versus, oh man, that guy was really tough. No one cares about that as you're an adult, right? And I think that's like something that the club life is still kind of split with, where like the patch heavy, do you know who I am, versus the guy that knows who he is and can be polite and respectful. I think those are the two different types of membership.
Yeah.
Like, both of our clubs were structured very differently, but the fact that, we had a time in our era, Bomber and I, where we had a leader that wanted to make sure that we were respected in public and that we were respectful to the public, and that's kind of that top down, where, it was enforced, and if you didn't do it, then you were going to face some sort of repercussions. So I think leadership plays a big role too.
He saw the bigger picture.
Absolutely. So, Bomber, as far as leadership and structure goes, what parallels did you see between military life and club life for those that didn't live both lives?
To be honest with you, it's relatively similar depending on the type of chapter that you were in. And I know that even within our own organization or former organization, there was very different types of chapters. I think we could agree to that, right? Some
Absolutely.
A lot more lackadaisical, others that were quite by the book, and then everything in between. It was organization, the uniformity of things, following a guideline or a set of, for us it was our book, right? the Constitution. It was the same thing as the Army. We had the AR 670-1. It told you everything you can up on. So if you up in that book, you already knew you were going to get this punishment, and translated to the club life. But I mean, they're very, very similar. I think that's why they're called paramilitary organizations. They're set up the same. I mean, the fact that we have a fight song is the same thing that we do in the military, right? It's a way to hype up and let the world know how loud we are, Mm-hmm. And Jason, I don't think you guys might have had the same thing that we did, but we had this chant that we do, and I'm sure everybody's heard it. But when you'd go to Palm Springs on a good national run, dude, and you'd hear that fight song, I'm sure people were hearing that from 2 miles away, going, "What is happening?"
Were you there in Daytona? One of the last years of Daytona, we did it in the Harley dealership. 300 of us.
I was at Daytona for 3 years. Yeah, I remember that one.
Yeah. Do you feel like members that joined after club life kind of had a leg up on members that maybe didn't come from street life or didn't come from military life? Do you think they kind of make it in club life easier? Or I guess I'm asking, do you think it's a pro or a con coming from military life going into club
military?
Life? Yeah.
To come from the military, I think it's a pro. I think you get a very, we're a lot like blank canvases, We may have a structure to us, but we're very easily moldable into what needs to be done. I think coming from any previous lifestyle, I think that's where complications come, because now you're mixing breeds, right? You're mixing their rules and this loyalty and that. Whereas with the military, once you're out, I mean, I'm always going to be loyal to the United States of America, but I don't have any loyalty to the Department of Justice or the Department of Defense or Department of the Army. I don't have a loyalty to anybody anymore in that sense, right? I just was a member.
But as far as like the basic things that you take from the military, I mean, getting up early, showing up, early to something, that responsibility of returning a phone call, your jobs, your duties that you take on, that you're going to successfully accomplish them. I mean, to go into the club life after doing the military, it had to have been like a pretty good ease, right? I mean, it wasn't, we see the guys that have never been in the military or never had that much structure that come around the club, and they're late for things, or things don't always work out, and there's always like a cloud kind of like following them. They have a hard time getting ready for events or going on runs, and I get all that because they didn't have that structure. They I was in the fire department, you were in the military. I mean, if you have that, it makes it easier, I think, to do something like this. I mean, you're going to deal with different people, like we talked about, get to know the guys you're coming around with, and that's the only struggle, right, is dealing with the people you're in the charter with or you're in your club. But as far as like the actual structure of it, I think it makes it night and day easier to get involved.
I totally agree. I mean, it's a very easy transition, I guess I'll say. There's a few things here and there that you might have to adapt to, which, again, we're all in the military. The military people go by adaptability, right? Mm-hmm. But the core structure is pretty much the same. I know that there's a hierarchy. I take orders from this person. I do this. These are my responsibilities. And I mean, I think you can definitely tell the difference between someone who's had a lack of structure in life versus someone who has.
Yeah.
Would you say, I've always wondered, would you say there's kind of a brotherhood within the brotherhood as far as meeting other members that were in the military? Like, do you guys have a certain connection within the club versus members that weren't?
I'll tell you like this. The brothers that have served that I was close to within the military, one of them is technically out bad, but I have no problem talking about him because he's an amazing brother and he was a great veteran at that. But he's a troubled veteran, which is what led to his demise in the club. He's a very good dude, but Thor, he was from Virginia. That guy was just always willing to help in any way, shape, or form. He was one of the best-hearted people I'd ever known, and if you'd ever took 10 minutes to sit next to him, I bonded with him as a prospect more than I had a lot of brothers, I'll put it that way, and that was solely based off of the military experience. And then another brother, I don't know what his status is anymore, but he was in Australia, and he was special operations in Australia. So he'd seen and done some things, and boy, the first time I was welcomed to Australia, he was like, I don't know how to explain it. He was a brother, but he was like a guardian angel, because we just sat there and the whole time we just went through our military experiences. And I'll be honest with you, I was a lot more of a listener on that one. Obviously, he is in that structure in the world, and I respect him for that. But the military guys if you see it, they tend to stick to each other a little bit closer. It's easier. We've known each other. Just like if maybe a punk rock guy came into the scene that you knew and then he happened to become a brother. Dude, it's no disrespect to anyone else, but you just got something together. You met.
Yeah, we have some shared history. Yeah, commonality, shared history, exactly. For sure.
So let's talk a little bit about what's going on with you these days. You want to tell us about what you're doing for work, your personal life, you have any kids or pets or... what you like to do? How's your routine, nowadays?
in the gym every day. That's kind of just a structural thing for me, I guess. I wake up every day in the morning, go to the gym, I fix my bed, I clean my 3-bedroom apartment that I'm the only person that lives in, but it's Texas, baby. You can afford a 3-bedroom out here for nothing. And I go to work, I come back. My life is very structured still, believe it or not. I don't think the structure disappears. What I do for fun is, dude, I'm a video gamer. I got sober while I was in the club, about 5 years into it, after one of my daddy in the club got locked up, and me and him were just like the two that would run drugs and bikes and the gambit for 5 years straight. And just before, he went in, I had gotten sober and tried to pull him with me, and video games were kind of my escape. I have a bunch of friends that I know in real life and people I've never met from all over the world. We all play competitively online, so much like people go and watch NFL and whatnot, people pay to play us watch. It's pretty cool.
You're saying that that's like your mental reset every day, like you said, like the structure, right? You get up, you make your bed, you make sure that's squared away, you go to the gym. Those are all things that help you, take a deep breath, get through whatever's going on, get the day started off right, so you don't just start dropping down, you know what I'm saying?
Right.
Yeah, I think those are all very important things that people need. If they're looking to improve their life, it's like start there. Easy stuff. Like I always tell people, like, you get up and clean your room and make your bed. It's one thing off your list. It's one thing to say you got accomplished, and you start the next thing. And exercise, like Mooch is always telling people, like, get that exercise in your body. Get your mind clear. It's like if you don't start doing these things, you're just gonna sink further and further into your own thoughts. And we know that can be dangerous.
In the military, they used to tell you that, idle time is dead time, first of all.
Yeah.
And always will be. But in the military, they used to tell us to stop thinking of ourselves as humans and start looking at us as ants, right? And if you watch an ant from the time that it's up to the time that it's not, it's doing something, right? And that's doing something, if you watch, is very structured every day. It'll crawl the same path, go grab this, bring it right back. I do the same thing every day. We're just like a bunch of ants, but my structure every day is the bed, this. It keeps me in a very just focused position all day so I can handle my tasks. And then when I get home, I kick my feet up. Normally right about now I'd probably be baking something to eat, and I'd be online with a bunch of my buddies getting ready to play some video games, and that's kind of like, I've heard you guys talk about this on your podcast before, but like that thing you look for, kind of that camaraderie, that group. My group, I'm lucky enough, is always online ready to play, and they're a bunch of grown-ass dudes that have kids and the whole nine, but that's their mental relief too, and we have fun. We make money doing it. We have fun. It's our way of betting because none of us are sports guys, so it's a big release for us.
I think that's big. We've talked about it, like you said, on some other podcasts, but leaving club life and then finding something that's not necessarily a replacement, but something to do with that time, right? And like for me, jiu-jitsu, like here I was still spending time with brothers and shared interests and stuff. And now you've got games, people have different things, but I think filling that void, so to speak, of not just sitting around and being by yourself, but finding something that you have in common with other people and still, having that shared interest with other grown adults. I think that goes a long way.
Because wouldn't you say that there's 24 hours in a day and it can be very long when you don't have something to do?
Absolutely.
I mean, you can only work so much, right? You got to have something to fill that other, 16 hours. Otherwise, you will go down a dark road.
I'm in a very remote part of Texas, so the being alone thing in the 24 hours has never felt as real as it does being in a very, very small military town. And I mean, like, I'm talking Sunday, Mondays, you're not going to see any cars out on the road. That's how small we are.
Yeah.
Here. So I feel those hours, but yeah, I mean, it's all about staying positively engaged, right? And another
Absolutely.
big one that I didn't get to mention is, again, I'm not religious, but I've been kind of studying the idea of religion as a story, right? And just kind of going back and trying to understand, because, you hear the word Jesus get thrown around a lot, or this religion versus that religion, and I was like, always had the question in my head of why are they so just passionate about this fight with each other, right? Kind of like if you go to the clubs, why are they so passionate about this fight, that most people aren't even involved in or don't know much about. So the religion thing's been kind of a fun time of like filling in the gaps. I study everything now. I've been studying Buddhism and Catholicism, Christianity, Islam. I mean, I'm breaking into all of them, and I think that's a huge one too for a lot of people that may not have those social skills to get out and go party, or don't want to be at a bar and don't feel like you have to be. There's a million other ways to do things now. We're in 2025 with AI all over us, dude. You can make friends online.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's a question I don't want to miss because I think people are going to be really interested in. But Explain what it was like getting sober while in the club, and was being a part of the club while getting sober a positive, or was it a hindrance?
Yeah, was it hard being around all the brothers, and all the parties? And, how hard was it to stay strong to do that?
Bomber, you know this, but other outside people may not, that, the Mongols have a clean and sober chapter, and they have, they have members that are, they hear of brothers trying to get sober, and they do try and help. So was it helpful that you were in the club while you were getting sober, or was it harder to do since you were in the club?
I'll say this, because I've struggled with addiction for quite some time. That wasn't my first stent of addiction. That was just my first stent of addiction with methamphetamines, right? I'd never been introduced to like crazy drugs. I was, again, Irvine. Cocaine and ecstasy, I think, were the craziest things that you could get your hands on in Irvine at the time. I'd had a stint with cocaine when I was younger until I went into the military. During the game life, a lot of guys would stay up till 4, 5, 6 o'clock in the morning playing video games, and I ran this computer gaming center so people would give me coke. Getting sober then was hard enough, and that was no other affluences around me that constantly were around us, right? In the club, I had to basically segregate myself to a point, and I think that's also kind of what initiated the slow roll towards my exit. Was as I got sober, I started realizing a lot of things that were keeping me there were just superficial. The stuff that I was there for originally, it had dissipated. We had a regime change. I had multiple regime changes with my chapter, and I didn't recognize anybody within it anymore. So the sobriety was kind of like it was a dual-edged sword. It was great for me in life because I did it by myself. I didn't go to any program, and not to hate on anyone who does it any other way, but I was very prideful of the fact that I got myself clean, especially in an environment where it's very easy to not be.
For sure.
But yeah, I wouldn't say it was any harder or not, because I think the addiction disease is just one of those ones that's hard no matter what. Was it readily available to me, though? Absolutely. And I think it didn't even come from the club. It was just having that patch. I could go to anybody, and it was a totally different world. I could walk into a bar, and someone's just going to walk up to me and be like, here you go, man, you want to go party in the bathroom?
Do you feel when you told brothers, at least brothers you were close with, you were trying to stay sober, did they support it?
So it was a very mixed thing, but the ones that, there's brothers and then there's brothers.
Yeah, for
so
sure.
The brothers were very supportive of it, totally understood what I was doing, and why I was doing it. So I would do my obligations. I'd go to every event still. I didn't just back out of everything, but I also gave myself a time limit. Hey, you know what? Usually after about 2 hours of being here is when the fun starts taking a turn. So I'm not going to drink. I'll have one, a soda, and then after about 2 hours, I'm out of here. And that's how I limited myself, so that way I could still maintain my obligation as a brother, obviously, to show up and support these events, but limit myself from going that way. And I had brothers that were very close to me that all knew what I was doing and supported it. Yeah.
What kind of advice, or just, I know there's a lot to it, but just general advice would you give to a club member that's trying to get sober?
You got to want it. I'll be honest with you. The hardest truth about drugs are nobody actually wants to do the drugs, but you just can't stop once you start, usually, is how it goes. And you can't stop until you want to. For me, it was waking up one day and just realizing, like, I'd been on a 7-day meth binge, or just riding around strip club to strip club with a former brother of mine, my daddy in the club, That's what we did. We were scumbags. We loved being on bikes, and we loved strippers. And I woke up one day after about 7 days of doing it, and I was like, what the am I doing in life? Like, this is not how you live life. This isn't what it was meant to be. And that day I made the decision to never do it again, and I went and talked to my P, and I told him what was going on, and he supported me, and it made it easy. Yeah,
that's a huge accomplishment. Accomplishment.
It was a lucky accomplishment, and God was in my corner, because that's not an easy one to kick. I'll tell you that much.
I think for me, like, I was sober in the club the majority of the time, and so my experience was a little, like, almost the opposite, right?
Yeah.
But what I do remember is being able to, like you said, being on your bike, going to strip clubs, part of the boys, being able to do that sober and really genuinely appreciating what I was doing was a much different feeling than doing that on a bender or because I was motivated or fueled by something else. So I was still able to do a lot of those same things to an exception, right? Like you said, I'll go to the party, but I'm not going to be at 4 a.m. at a hotel room after party, right? If I'm trying to stay sober. But I would still have those moments where I'm in the corner talking to some brother and getting to know him, or on our bikes riding from bar to bar. And I think that's the piece, or that's kind of the takeaway, at least it was for me. It was still being able to enjoy those things without the substances.
The hardest thing about that was so after about a year of like kicking it, I started coming back around quite a bit. I started showing up to everything, and I mean, when I say show up to everything, I mean I'd show up to every single event, fly out of the country, fly all over the world.
I
I was everywhere. But what I did was I got lucky enough that I got placed into weird positions with certain brothers that were exactly asking what you said, which is like, you could see they didn't want to be in the position that they were in with it anymore, but they just didn't. They couldn't say that to certain brothers that they were around, right? They'd be looked at as less than. So I noticed certain brothers started kind of flocking my way, and when they did, I'd welcome with open arms, and I'd just be like, hey, let's go do this. Let's go have a drink over here. And then find a way to counsel, you know what I mean? And not to sound like I was in a higher place than them, but I put myself at their level, and I was like, bro, what are you doing this for? Like, how are you going to feel tomorrow? You know, putting that line up your nose is going to hurt. You know what I mean? It'll be fun tonight, and we can all say that. I can say it. I'm honest
That's
about it.
That's a big piece of the brotherhood, right? Is being able to help others around you, and especially being that guy. Like you were that guy that people were able to come to. That's a very important role in any life, right? But being able to be like that is a very important role, and I'm sure they were grateful to have you.
Sometimes guys just need to know that there's someone else that can see that they're struggling, right? They can acknowledge it, right? You know, I mean, it just takes that one hand on the shoulder and say, hey, brother, like, I can tell you're not doing good, you know, or I can tell you need something, you know. It's like you can't always be jumping around and say, let's go to the next party, right? Someone's got to say, wake up.
And one thing I'm going to say is this real quick with the sobriety thing. That goes patch or no patch, like you said. That's just man, you know what I mean? To check on your brothers, other men. You know, I check on people at work that I don't even know. You know, I caught one of my employees last week, and he just looked like he had a tear in his eye. I sat down in his office. He got up like, sir. I'm like, dude, sit down. And we sat down and we had a talk. Check on brothers. You know what I mean? And addicts, same thing. It doesn't have to be brother or no brother. If you know someone's struggling with addiction, dude, be a man, like a good man, you know? Go be the person that reaches out to them, because everybody else is going to turn their backs on them, you know? Let's keep it real. You see an addict, most people don't want to go that way. And you could be the one that does change their life.
Those are some of those positives of Club Life. We've talked about this in different episodes, and, you know, a lot of people can tell you the negatives, but the takeaways, right? The fact that you were able to, A, have people there to help you get clean, but B, you were able to be there to help people get clean. And I think that's the thing we can take with us, patch or no patch, where like, I was a good member, or I was a good brother, or these are the things I did to help others.
Yeah.
On that, like, what are some other positive takeaways you had? And then just out of curiosity, because I know you're active, what other countries did being a Mongol bring you to?
So Club Life taught me quite a bit, man. I learned, that I had it very good in life, because I got a lot of backstories from brothers all over the world, and then just as close as fucking 5 miles away from where I grew up, you know, that just had totally different backgrounds than me. And it humbled the fuck out of me, because I was just like, dude, like, you know, again, the God thing started coming up real fast, because I was just like, that could have been me. That could have been my card, you know? And it wasn't. So humility was a big one, I would say. And, you know, it definitely took me from just some normal ass little white boy from Irvine into something else. You know, I transformed pretty quickly having to live that life. But I think it was for the better, because what I did was I grew this monster looking character, and everyone that ever met me afterwards was like, man, like, I was stoked to get to sit down and talk to you. You're just a normal ass dude. You look like you'd kill me, but, you know, and I get it from guys that are, you know, top dogs flying around in private jets all over the place, to the guy that works at McDonald's. You know, it's cool. It's a cool thing to get, I think, to earn. It's like an accolade, you know?
It's that fascination, right? It's the people outside looking and saying, I wish I could do that. Whether it's, you know, like you said, someone that's getting on a private jet, or it's some guy that's bagging groceries. They look at us and they say, wow, what's the mystery behind that guy? And if you're willing to talk to that person, you just made their whole day. You made their whole year. It just takes a quick conversation, an acknowledgement, a hello, you know, hey bro, how you doing? And I always like to look at people's name tags when I'm places, if they're wearing a name tag, and I say it by their name. I go, hey John, how you doing? Or thanks for, you know, Robert, thanks for bagging my groceries, or I appreciate you, you know, like that little level from a guys like us that look the way we look walking around, that's something they're going to remember forever. And it's like, how hard was that? You see somebody, like you said, you see a guy at work that you can tell is got a tear in his eye, right? You see some people, they're walking with their head down when they're walking in public, right? And I like to catch them off guard and say, hey, how you doing today? And that might be the one thing that stops that person from going down a dark alley. That one interaction. And it's like, how hard was that to do? It's not hard. And so, like you said, Johnny, you have to reach out to people, and you have to think about people, and you have to make the effort, because if we're, as men, if we're not making the effort, we are failing ourselves. We are fortunate to be alive, and we need to acknowledge that and
be authentic.
And pay it forward.
And remember the humility. You know, that's the other big thing. Is just remember the humility. Patch on today. You didn't have a patch on yesterday. You might not have it on tomorrow. you know?
Yep. And that goes with being authentic too, right? Be who you are.
Yep.
Let your real self shine through regardless of your patch.
Amen. And I was going to say, you know, it's funny that you mentioned that looking at people's names. So I have a rule. In my industry, obviously, I have to talk to people on the phone all the time. So I always carry a notepad and a pen right next to my desk, right next to my mouse. And I always write people's names as I get on that phone call with the Chase representative or the Verizon representative. And I write their name down. So when they're like, hey, so-and-so, da-da-da. Most people don't say to them. And I'm like, hey, how are you, so-and-so? And you could literally see the difference in the conversation and how much more willing they are to help you just by that one thing. And like you said, if you see a server or a bartender or someone, you know, cashing out your groceries, thank you, Lacey. Thank you, Tom. Dude, I bet you they're talking about you at their dinner table. And what did you do? Take 2 seconds out of your day to be nice?
Exactly. It's not that hard, guys. It's not that hard.
Right.
And people
I got a couple quick questions before we wrap up. So, there was the one where I want to know the places you traveled to as a Mongol, because I know you went out of country. So what are some fun places the club took you to?
Okay, so non-stateside, I've been to Mexico. I've been to Germany, Switzerland, France, Russia, Australia, Singapore, Malaysia, Thailand. We were supposed to go to Denmark, but that got canceled because apparently all of our brothers were locked up at the time. So there was nobody to go visit. We even tried to arrange a visit behind bars, but they wouldn't allow it because it's something to do with visas.
I helped start that Denmark chapter, so that would have been cool.
Yeah, I was trying, man.
And what was the best place to ride? If you think about it, like you have a memory of like riding in one of those countries. What was your favorite?
Dude, you know what? I have to say I have a really big experience in either Costa Rica, which I forgot to mention. There's a lot more countries. My tabs ran to the point where I couldn't run them on my vest anymore.
Yeah, that's why I asked, because I remember.
Yeah, I mean, I literally probably had I've gone to every single country that we had up until that point. So I don't know what's changed in the timeline. I'm not going to say it ever. But at that point, I'd been to everyone. And I'm going to say Thailand was probably the best adventure of my life. I mean, riding on the wrong side of the road is the biggest trip of your life, but then doing it with no helmets, Thai drivers, scooters getting all over the place. Like Bangkok's one of the sketchiest places you could probably ever ride, but it's one of the most memorable places that I've ever been.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
So, you know, we talked a lot about family, and you expressed how you have a good relationship with your family growing up, and you also have an even better relationship with them now because you understand and you appreciate them and all that stuff. When you joined the club, did that relationship falter at all, or did it stay strong? And then when you left the club, did it regain, or was it always strong throughout the time?
So I was fortunate in the fact that, well, it was hilarious actually. When I first started hanging around the clubs, my dad would Google what the bandana hanging out of my back pocket meant, because again, they come from a totally different country where motorcycle clubs don't exist. I mean, I think your former club just now established in the Balkan area. So like Yugoslavia, the Balkan area, Croatia, Bulgaria, Albania, those places. So they didn't even know what it was, but he Googled the color of my bandana and came down to a list of things. They never hated on it. They were worried about me, I think like any parent would be, because what they read, you know, like they asked me, did I have to kill somebody to get into the club, was the first question I ever got asked. And I started laughing and I'm like, well, I haven't yet and I've got all my patches, so I'll let you know if that changes, you know. They were always supportive, regardless of what I was going through. Worried would be the best way to describe it. And I would only say that it grew throughout the time in the club, because they saw me go through my highs and my lows. Although I was distant from them at most periods of my life because I was busy traveling or, you know, living the club life, they would see me from here and there. And when I left, you know, I think it was a big sigh of relief to a lot of them. Not just my mom, dad, but I mean cousins and just even friends, man. They all reached out and they're just like, hey, you know, we're like really happy to see you on this side of things. You've done the military and made it out. You've done the club and made it out. Can we like chill the out now? Yeah. Maybe go to Bible study or something, you know?
Yeah. Can we do something normal now?
Yeah. But the relationship always stayed strong, thankfully. You know, I'm very fortunate with my family.
That's awesome.
Well, thanks so much for coming on, Bomber. Really appreciate it, man. It was some really good stuff. I definitely think the sobriety stuff could be helpful for others and the military stuff. So thank you so much for coming on, brother.
Absolutely. Thank you guys for having me. And to all your audiences, dude, if they ever need to talk to somebody, I've been there, I've done it. I'm not a stranger. I may not get back to you right away, but hit me up. I always got an open ear.
How do we get a hold of you on Instagram?
Instagram, it's going to be at Bomber from the Block with a BLOC at the end.
Got it.
Got to keep the OC in the name.
Or, you know, everyone that follows me, just you can look it up on my friends list too, because I follow them and stay active with him.
There you go.
Well, we really appreciate you being on. I mean, it's huge. This is a great episode. A lot of people are going to get a lot of good things from this, and we'd love to have you on again. That was great. Really appreciate your time, brother. Thank you.
I appreciate you guys having me on.
This portion of the podcast is brought to you by First Bank.
Thanks, First Bank.
Thank you, Johnny, and thanks, Mooch. Remember to hit the like and subscribe buttons below. Find us on Instagram at automoto.ent, at OG_Mooch, at Jason_Logan81, and for more info and episodes, go to automotoentertainment.com. Thank you for tuning in. See you on the next episode of Patched. Patch merchandise is available at automotoentertainment.com. The Patch podcast series is brought to you by Oak and Iron, Craft Cocktail Bar in Thousand Oaks, California, by Outdoor Creations, serving the Southern California and Nashville areas.